Well, hey everyone. So this is just going to be a quick update to kind of show you what I've been working on as far as the VDS Basic dialogue scripting. Um, as I mentioned in the last update, I would talk about execution, and there's not really a whole lot to say. If you've ever attempted to write a scripting language of your own, then you probably know what to expect. And if you haven't done that, then this really isn't something I can summarize in a handful of minutes. But what I do want to point out is execution time. Well, let me just show you. So I need to scoot this window out of the way here so you all can also see the terminal that I'm running this from, and pay attention to the bottom here. I'm going to load a quick program, basic program I wrote, and you can see all it really does is iterate from 1 to 10 or 1 million and increment a variable. And I'll execute this. You can see it kind of hangs there for a moment, and to be more specific, it hangs there for 6.09 seconds. So that kind of establishes a baseline of how many of these commands can you execute in a second. So that'd be somewhere around roughly 125,000 per second. To be honest, I would like to see that higher. On the plus side, that's a little bit more than I was expecting. So I think it's going to come down to how well can I optimize this. And one thing I'll say is there are a lot of string operations running in the background, and that of course is going to slow this down. So that actually might make a good part 4. I'll talk about part 3 in a moment, but it might make a good part 4. How do you use HX Scout in particular to optimize code? And I know in the Stencyl community there's quite a few questions about how you use HX Scout to look for bottlenecks in your game. And while I wouldn't say I'm going to plan to make this a proper tutorial, it certainly would help be able to show what to look for, because it's not, if you don't know what to look for, the tool is a little tricky to use. But let me compare this to, well, I tried to write this, well, look here on the left. I tried to write the same program in Haxe, and I kept getting execution time of 0. See, I'm going to print the execution time. I kept getting 0, and the main reason is it just ran too fast. So what you're looking at there is a program that for every iteration on I, it's going to iterate over j from 0 to 10,000. So basically it's at least 10,000 times more lines of code being executed. In fact, it's actually a little bit more than that, because I also have a conditional that I'm not running, that I didn't run in the basic program. But I set this up just so if I type in a 1, you'll see at the bottom in the terminal there, yeah, it'll tell you the execution time. So it's 0.599. In fact, interestingly enough, I executed this before starting this update just to kind of see what to expect and plan what to talk about. And it actually ran a little bit slower, and I have to wonder if there's a little bit of a bottleneck in communicating with the log viewer. So if you're familiar with Stencyl, there's a log viewer. When you test your game, any output's fed to the log viewer, which is, for subsequent, if I'm not compiling, then I'll run the program just straight from the terminal, because then I don't have to wait for the compilation. It's actually running quite a bit faster, at least 25%, I'd say, roughly. But still, 0.5, 0.6, I guess, if you want to round, versus my 6. Not only is this code running 10 times faster, but you can see on the left it actually has 10,000 times more lines of code. So roughly I'd say it's sped up by a factor of 100,000. So that'd be 5 orders of magnitude faster, which I don't think anyone would be surprised, at least anyone who's worked with multiple programming languages. And my implementation of BASIC here is definitely interpreted versus compiled programming, so interpreted is always going to be slower. Something else I'm going to show, I actually have to restart the program now. Well, while I'm here, I might as well show you a little bit about what I'm working on with the game, because that might be a little bit more interesting just watching, terminal output run this. So I've just started to use, VDS Basic to implement dialogue sequences. And I've gotten pretty far with that. Most of my time has been actually spent extending my set of commands to, include ones to interface with the game directly. And now that I'm actually starting to write some VDS script programs, whatever you want to call them, for the purposes of dialogue, I'm starting to get a glimpse that I'm on the right track with this. So that would actually be part 3 to kind of give an in-depth tour how I'm programming dialogue sequences using my own scripting language. But I just want to show off at least a basic one I've put together. Because if for no other reason, I'm also outlining the basics of the story, which is something that I've had in my mind for a while. So some of these dialogues might be tweaked a little bit, just like the rough draft of a novel or a short story or an essay or whatever. You're not always going to have everything, written down the first time the way you want it. I've done NaNoWriMo a few times. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's a National Novel Writing Month. It usually takes place, it always takes place in November. And the goal is to write a 50,000 word novel in a month. And the key to success with that is just to throw away your inner editor. And if that process has taught me anything about writing, it's the importance of getting your ideas down first, and then you can refine them. So this is rough draft of dialogue, but I think that the basics are there. So where this takes place, after the player beats the first level, they go to a town, which I'll show on the map in a little bit. They go to a town and find Rada. So that's Rada. He is the prisoner in the Towers of Vallas isometric, I guess, Game Boy-ish inspired game. But he's an actual character now. He has some substantial speaking lines, and he's going to take the role of kind of a mentor. So I have I originally had this set up as Scum style dialogue lines, which if you're familiar with Secret of Monkey Island or Maniac Mansion or those old LucasArts games, that's kind of how I had this looking. But I wanted to see the faces actually, so I drew some portraits and changed the dialogue style a little bit, so now it's a speech bubble. I have a little arrow there to show that you have to push something to continue, which on the execution side, my basic programs have a lot of pause and wait statements that basically hold interpretation until it's been resumed again, which that occurs whenever the player hits a button, scrolls the dialogue forward a little bit. So you can see the story here. So this is kind of explaining what's happening in the opening sequence, which I know I put in one of my updates a couple updates ago. I don't remember exactly when. There's a little movie-ish clip I put together where Marika is running through the woods, running away from this unknown thing. She finally gets to Rada and starts to report on what she saw. So I'll go through the rest of this real quick. Okay, so she found the guards in level 1, and that's supposed to be bad because that means the Vallan Empire is advancing. Marika is not taken very seriously by I call them the guerrilla for now, but I might change that. So they're discussing what the sphere is, and so the way the story is going to unfold is Rada is going to send Marika to a construction site where the Vallan Empire is doing something. And rather than every level being get to the exit flag, there'll be some kind of objective. Now, the default objective will be just to get to the end of the level, which makes sense for the first one, where she's usually just supposed to scout, the area and see what's around. Okay, so they're getting to the end of the sequence here. Okay, so her brother that Rada's talking about is Kada, which I guess on the subject of world building, I kind of made a mistake because I thought, well, all of my character names either end with KA or DA. And I thought, well, that might be actually kind of interesting to have all the feminine names end with KA and all of the masculine names end with DA. Of course, Kada, who is Marika's brother, ends with TA. And I didn't want to change his name because it's already basically hard-coded into the other game I was talking about. Yeah, there's Kada. So I thought, well, this is my world I'm building here. So in a lot of languages, not so much English, but certainly Spanish, German, you have masculine words and feminine words. And as far as names go, there's certainly a set of masculine names and feminine names. I thought, well, why not have a third category? Just put scholars, because Kada's a scholar. Just have scholars be thought of as just a I don't know what you want to call it, not a separate gender, but just a separate group, which kind of has some interesting implications if you think about people being named when they're born, because that kind of sets a destiny. Of course, there's nothing that says that names have to be assigned when you're born either. There's exactly how the world of Vallas works is really just limited by my imagination. Maybe people are named at age 7 or something. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead yet, but it's kind of what I was thinking with the names anyway. So there's a little bit more thought into the names of these characters than it might seem like at first. Okay, so what's going to happen after the next thing? There. So these dialogue sequences will have effects on the game. And now new paths have been unlocked. So Marika can now access more levels on the map. Now the next thing isn't part of the real dialogue sequence, but what I decided I could do is let Marika, just like you would see in Scum style, adventure games, is you can select what you want to say. So you have a little menu of 4 or 5 different responses that Marika can give. And one thing I decided to do is to be able to let the player basically come to Kada and ask for help. And that'd be my way of dealing with tutorials and hints, because I didn't want to force the player to go through all these hints and tutorial sequences all the time. But for new players, it certainly would help to get a little bit of insight into game mechanics such as using the knife to snipe the little sensors on the turrets and things that they may not think of their own. So especially at the earlier parts of the game, you can always come back to Rada and get some hints and how to progress if you get stuck somewhere, and you can tell Rada what you've observed, and he'll basically unlock a new level so that you eventually get to the bosses. Yeah, the other little image here doesn't show up, but I'm actually quite happy with the way that's working out, because that's going to, I think, allow me to strike a good balance between giving the player enough information for them to complete the game, but at the same time just not bombarding them. In fact, that's kind of the idea with some of the first few skills in the game too. Rather than having a tutorial that says, this is how you roll, this is how you scout, this is how you throw a knife, have these things be skills, and then the player can learn them as they pick up the books, and then it's not something they have to sit through so much. It's a new thing they unlocked. It's now a little reward they get for finding a book and then earning enough experience points to gain skill from it. So that's about all actually that's not about all I have. I want to show the map real quick, because that is definitely different. In fact, I'm going the wrong way. Go this way. Yeah, I put these little exits here, so that's no longer a proper level. It's a special town type level that you're not going to complete when you leave it. But initially, and I won't reboot the game to show this, but initially this path here is all that's unlocked. So as soon as you beat level 1, level 1's now the only option. But as soon as you beat level 1, the only place you can go is Larica to talk to Rada. But now he has unlocked this path that is construction site. So Marika can now get to level 1. Once she completes that, I'm going to eventually set it so that the next 2 levels are unlocked, so that the player has some choices. There's not going to be a linear progression. In fact, I'm going to try to get the game to be progressively less linear as time goes on. So the next thing to unlock will be the paths that more or less touch that first river, and then the player will have 3 or 4 options of levels to play, and then 6 or 8, and then finally the whole game. Okay, so that is all I have for you all. So in part 3, I'll talk a little bit more about dialogue sequences and kind of how the VDS script is powering that in the background. But for now, that's it. So, thank you for watching, and have a good one, everyone.